Welcome to or welcome back to Rabbit Hole Radio. My name is Megan. In today's video, we're going to be going down a deep dive if kids under 16 should be banned from social media. Grab a snack, grab some water, curl up with a blanket, or maybe do some house cleaning or drawing or some sort of hobby while you're listening. But either way, let's dive into this rabbit hole.
This is Rabbit Hole Radio.
Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that anyone under 16 is no longer allowed to use TikTok, no Instagram, no Snapchat, no YouTube, no scrolling before school, no checking their notifications before bed. For many teenagers, that sounds impossible, but for others, it sounds like a dream. But around the world, governments, psychologists, parents, teachers, and technology experts are asking a question that has been increasingly difficult to ignore. Is social media harming children? And if it is, should governments step in and stop kids from using it altogether? Let's get ready to dive into one of the biggest debates of the digital age. To understand why people are talking about banning social media for children, we first have to understand how deeply social media has become embedded into everyday life. 20 years ago, the internet looked very different. Most people logged onto a family computer. Social media barely existed. The average teenager wasn't carrying a device that could instantly connect them with millions of people around the world. Suddenly, everything changed in an instant. Facebook exploded in popularity. Instagram turned everyday life into carefully curated highlight reels. Snapchat introduced disappearing messages and street culture. And then came TikTok, an app so effective at capturing attention that people regularly lose hours of their day without even realizing it. What makes modern social media so different isn't just the content. It's the algorithms. Every swipe, every like, every comment, every second spent watching a video is recorded and analyzed. The platforms learn exactly what keeps you engaged and then deliver more of it. The goal isn't simply to entertain you, the goal is to keep you scrolling. Because in the attention economy, your time is the product, and nowhere is that attention more valuable than with young people. For years, concerns about social media were mostly dismissed as parents worrying about the newest technology. But over time, researchers began noticing troubling patterns. Rates of anxiety among young people appeared to be rising. Depression diagnosis increased. Many teenagers reported feeling lonelier despite being more connected than any generation before them. Now, it's important to say that social media isn't necessarily the sole cause of these issues. Mental health is incredibly complex, but many experts believe social media may be contributing to the problem. One of the biggest concerns is comparison. For previous generations, you compared yourself to classmates, neighbors, or people in your community. But in this day and age, teenagers compare themselves to influencers, celebrities, fitness models, beauty creators, and wealthy content creators from around the world. And most of what people post online isn't reality. It's a highlight reel, the best moments, the best angles, the best experiences. When you're constantly comparing your behind the scenes life to someone else's carefully edited highlight reel, it's easy to feel like you're falling behind. And then you have cyberbullying. Unlike traditional bullying, which often ended when school was over, online harassment can follow someone home. It can happen for 24 hours a day. It can reach thousands of people instantly, and sometimes it becomes impossible to escape. Supporters of the social media restriction argue that children are being exposed to pressures that previous generations have never had to navigate. And that's where the debate begins. Are these platforms simply tools? Or are they environments that children aren't fully prepared to handle? Because depending on your answer, the solution can look very different. For those who support restricting social media access for children under 16, the argument is actually pretty simple. Children are protected from certain things because we recognize they're still developing. They can't vote, they can't legally buy alcohol, they can't sign most contracts. Society already accepts that there are some decisions and environments that young people aren't fully prepared to navigate on their own. Supporters of a social media ban argue that these platforms should be viewed in a similar way, not because social media is inherently evil, but because it's incredibly powerful, and children may not be equipped to deal with its effects. Many psychologists point to the fact that adolescent brains are still developing, particularly the areas responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and decision making. In other words, the very group most vulnerable to social pressure is being placed inside an environment built around likes, shares, followers, and constant validation. Imagine being a 13-year-old and having your self-worth measured in real time. Your photo hits 100 likes and it makes you feel amazing, but the next one might only get 20, and suddenly you're questioning yourself. For some kids, that cycle becomes impossible to ignore. Supporters also point out that kids are getting very little to no sleep because of social media. Many teenagers admit to checking social media before bed, during the day, and immediately after waking up. Late night scrolling has become so common, some experts believe is contributing to a widespread sleep problem among young people. And when sleep suffers, everything else often suffers too. School performance, mental health, physical health, relationships. Supporters of the restriction argue that if social media companies will voluntarily protect children, governments may eventually have to step in. But not everybody agrees with that, and that's where things get complicated. Critics of social media bans argue that the problem isn't necessarily as simple as it sounds. First, they question whether the ban would even work. And let's be honest, teenagers have always found creative ways around restrictions. I know I did as a kid. Teenagers can just use fake birthdays, borrow accounts, they can use VPNs now that are so accessible, or alternative apps. History suggests that when something becomes forbidden, many young people simply become more determined to access it. Others argue that social media isn't harmful. In fact, some people say that it's life-changing. For teenagers living in small towns, for kids who feel isolated, for young artists, musicians, writers, and creators, social media provide connection, support, education, and opportunity. A teenager struggling to find people who understand them might discover an entire community online. Young artists might find their first audience. A future filmmaker might learn skills that weren't available to previous generations. Critics argue that banning social media altogether ignores these benefits. Then, there's another concern. Who gets to decide what people can access online? Some worry that once governments begin restricting internet for one reason, it could create a precedent for border controls in the future. To these critics, the issue isn't just social media. It's about personal freedom, parental responsibility, and whether government should be making those decisions at all. So, while supporters see restrictions as protection, opponents see them as overreach. And that's why the debate has become so heated, because both sides generally believe they're protecting young people. They're just approaching the problem from completely different directions. One of the most interesting parts of the entire debate is there doesn't seem to be a clear consensus among young people themselves. Some teenagers openly admit that social media has negative impacts on their lives. They talk about endless scrolling for hours. They talk about feeling anxious when posts don't perform well. They talk about comparing themselves to influencers, classmates, and strangers online. Some say they wish social media had never become such a major part of their lives in the first place. But others feel completely different. For them, social media isn't just entertainment. It's where friendships happen. It's where communities exist. It's where they discover music, hobbies, interests, and opportunities. For many teenagers, especially those living in rural communities or struggling to fit in at school, social media can provide connections that might otherwise be impossible to find. And that's what's making this issue so difficult. Social media isn't affecting everyone the same way. Some people feel empowered by it, others feel overwhelmed, some people find community, it makes others insecure. For every teenager who says social media is damaging their mental health, another says it's one of the few places where they feel understood. So maybe the question isn't whether social media is entirely good or bad. Maybe the reality is that it's both. And that's making finding a solution far more complicated than simply banning an app. Let's say a government decides tomorrow that nobody under 16 can use social media. What would happen next? Well, first, platforms would need a way to verify a user's age. At first glance, that sounds reasonable, but then another problem appears. How do you prove someone's age online? Would users need to upload government issue identification? Would facial recognition software be used? Would parents have to verify their child's identities? Suddenly, a conversation about protecting privacy becomes a conversation about collecting more personal information. And not everyone is comfortable with that. Then there's enforcement. Even even if age restrictions are introduced, how would they be monitored? Would the platforms be responsible? Would the government be responsible? Would it be up to the parents? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when people simply ignore the rules? The internet has a long history of people finding workarounds. Fake birthdays have existed almost as long as age restrictions themselves. VPNs can hide locations. New platforms appear constantly. Critics argue that a ban may push young people into less regulation corners of the internet rather than keeping them safer. Supporters respond that even if a ban isn't perfect, reducing access can still make a meaningful difference. And once again, we're left with two completely different viewpoints. One side believes imperfect protection is better than no protection at all. The others believe that restrictions may create entirely new problems. Neither side has all the answers, and that's exactly why this conversation continues to grow. The debate surrounding social media isn't really about social media apps. It's not TikTok's fault, it's not Instagram or Snapchat. At its core, it's something much bigger. It's about childhood. It's about protecting people's mental health and also protecting their freedom at the same time. It's about technology evolving faster than society can keep up with. For the first time in human history, children have access to a digital world that follows them everywhere they go. A world capable of educating them, connecting them, entertaining them, but also influencing them in ways we're still trying to understand. And social media has brought incredible opportunities for so many people. It's connected people across continents, created careers that never existed before, given a voice to people who may never have been heard otherwise. But it's also introduced challenges that previous generations never had to face. And that's why this debate isn't going away anytime soon. Whether social media restrictions become more common or not, one thing is clear. The relationship between young people and technology is changing, and the decisions being made today could shape an entire generation. But now, I want to hear from you. Do you think social media should be banned for anyone under 16? Or do you think that crosses the line? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Deep Dive Tuesday, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Rabbit Hole Radio, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss future deep dives, mysteries, internet rabbit holes, and strange stories from around the world. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. This is Megan, signing out.